Jorge Gamebred Masvidal is one of the baddest, meanest, and toughest fighters in mixed martial arts history. But when it comes to being one of the absolute phenoms of the sport, he doesn't quite make the cut. For some, he's a legend unlike any.
But he had to go through this guy right here. Didn't work out too well, did it, Jorge? What a champion you are. Thank you.
The Ben Askren fight, though, that was it. That was the cherry on top. And then, of course, the murking of Nate Diaz. I mean, he beat the fuck out of Nate Diaz. I mean, that was a crazy fight. And they were talking about running that back.
But for some, he's a journeyman who simply overachieved.
I'm going to expose journeyman Jorge Masvidal in front of the world.
How do you feel about the guy?
Well, I always felt he's a fake, he's a fraud, you know. I knew this going into the fight that he's a fake. And
see, a lot of people they put such a negative connotation with that journeyman, that phrase journeyman. That's not necessarily a negative thing. You have to be good to be a journeyman.
Who is right and who is wrong? From his bare knuckle beginnings to his rise as a UFC's top welterweight contender, to his ultimate downfall once more, let's take a look at the story of one of the most intriguing personalities in MMA. Jorge Masvidal made a successful start to his MMA journey when he secured a first-round knockout win in his debut in 2003. But unlike some of the other big names in the sport, his career was full of ups and downs. For the first 8 years, Masvidal fought the who's who of mixed martial arts outside of the UFC, most notably competing in Strikeforce and Bellator, where he managed to make it to the upper echelon of his respective divisions, but unfortunately failed to capture any belts.
By the time the UFC came out, I wasn't too visualizing that I was gonna be in that video game. I just hadn't clicked, and then as I started competing and then the UFC game came out and then they put me in it a couple years ago, I was like, wow, that's awesome.
At 23-7, Masvidal signed with the UFC in 2013 and made a pretty impressive start to his career by defeating Tim Means and Michael Chiesa in his first 2 fights, before suffering his first promotional loss at the hands of Rustam Khabilov in 2013.
Fighting was one of the main things, you know. If where I grew up, everybody would just fight. You know, if I thought that color was blue and you thought it was red, and we didn't come to an agreement, then we were gonna fight. And you know, whoever won, I guess it was that color. You know.
So it's safe to say that his career has been quite a roller coaster ride. In his first 15 UFC fights, Masvidal had 9 wins and 6 losses while competing in the lightweight and welterweight division. Despite facing the best fighters on the planet, Gamebred was never really considered a big fish. But make no mistake about it, Masvidal is tough as nails. But being tough alone doesn't win fights. Even the top guys in his division won't put any respect on his name. For instance, he's been called a journeyman by Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman, and Colby Covington.
nothing but a journeyman.
With that journeyman.
Masvidal took those comments personally, and in 2019, he produced one spectacular performance after another. The year was a major turning point in Masvidal's career. It's as if he magically transformed into an unbreakable fighter. But to be honest, he did need a bit of magic to resurrect, especially after 2 tough losses against Damian Maia and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, after which Masvidal's back was against the wall. Things went from bad to worse when he was booked to fight Darren Till in enemy territory in London, England. But Masvidal turned a misfortune into an opportunity of a lifetime when the cage doors closed at UFC London. Till was the aggressor in the first round, and he even managed to stun the Miami native. But he managed to survive and started landing shots of his own. 3 minutes into the second round of their 5-round fight at UFC London in 2019, Masvidal burst forward with a crushing left hook that landed right on the button, and Till was out before anyone knew. A hush fell over the crowd as Till's head bounced off the canvas multiple times, but Masvidal was quick to offer some moral support.
He's going to be a tiger one day. Right now, he's a young bull.
He's gonna be a tiger, so pick him up. Don't start dissing him and shit, you know? That's a warrior right there.
Masvidal's big night didn't end there. During a backstage interview with Laura Sanko, Leon Edwards, who won his fight against Gunnar Nelson in the co-main event, chirped at Masvidal, but he was having none of it. Street Jesus walked towards Rocky and suddenly pounced on him with a 3-piece and a soda combo, kickstarting a rivalry that still hasn't come to a conclusion.
And then he tells me to shut up. You know, we're everybody watching this back home from Miami was like, you should have punched him as soon as he asked you a question while you're interview, because that's my natural instinct.
Masvidal's huge knockout win coupled with the backstage brawl went viral, and his star rose to a greater heights that night. What came after his trip to London literally broke the internet. After a highlight reel knockout win against Darren Till, Masvidal faced former Olympian and Bellator and ONE FC champion Ben Askren. The build to their fight was intense, and Askren's outspokenness irked Masvidal to the point that he promised to punish him in the most cruel way possible.
Give a damn. If George has reservations at the IHOP and doesn't want to come to work, I'm not missing an opportunity.
That is exactly what he did when the two locked horns at UFC 239, where 5 seconds into the fight, Masvidal charged towards Askren and blasted him with a flying knee. The fight was over before it even began. Askren was stiff as a board as the medical staff tried to bring him back to his senses. After setting the record for the fastest knockout in UFC history, the sky was the limit for the Cuban American. And in his very next fight, he locked horns with one of the biggest stars in all of combat sports, Nate Diaz, for the symbolic BMF title at UFC 244 in November of 2019. Only 3 months ago, Diaz had made his return to the octagon after a 3-year layoff to beat Anthony Pettis, and with Masvidal already being a viral sensation by that point, the fight did big numbers.
With this belt, I want to defend it against Jorge Masvidal. Had a good last fight.
Diaz had his moments in the fight, but Masvidal was the dominant force. He was sharper, stronger, and had more tools in his arsenal. The Stockton native was bruised and battered, and ultimately, Masvidal was declared the winner by Dr. Stoppage at the end of the 3rd round. The win propelled Masvidal to a short-notice welterweight fight against the Nigerian nightmare Kamaru Usman at UFC 251 in 2020, where he replaced Gilbert Burns, who had to withdraw due to COVID. Jorge only had 6 days to prepare for the biggest fight in his career, and although he showed great resilience, he was never in it and lost by a comfortable decision.
Do Usman, obviously, it's a no-brainer. Usman, could they offer me bigger names that pay me more money? Yes, for a fact. But if it's up to me, Usman.
For months after that, he continued to call for a rematch. His argument was that he wasn't able to perform to the best of his abilities because he was not prepared. And with a full camp, he'd shut the Nigerians' lights out.
Myself and I saying, nah, he's not the champ. I'm the champ, and I'm gonna prove it when we get in there. You know, there's a reason why he doesn't want to fight me, and he says he wants to fight a guy that's ranked under me that he already beat.
Masvidal got his wish at UFC 261 in 2021, but Kamaru Usman turned the tables on him by knocking him out cold in the 2nd round. The hunter became the hunted. 11 months later, Masvidal faced his friend turned bitter rival, Colby Covington, at UFC 272 in 2022. The fight itself wasn't as competitive as the pre-fight press conference, and Covington dominated his foe thoroughly, winning by a comfortable decision and handed Masvidal his 3rd consecutive loss. Gamebred wasn't happy with his performance and warned Covington that if he seen him in the streets, he'd break his jaw.
Masvidal's a wild man. Listen, I'm telling you, if he gets a chance, he'll take a swing at him, 100%.
So somebody, if I see him out in the streets, I'm gonna give him everything I got to break his fucking jaw, you know?
To teach Covington a lesson for his chaotic trash talking, Masvidal did exactly what he said he would do and assaulted Covington outside of a restaurant in Miami and is now facing legal issues due to it. Masvidal hasn't lost more than 3 fights in a row in his whole career. So when he faces a terrible stylistic matchup in Gilbert Burns at UFC 287, he will have his work cut out for him. Does he still have the ability to bounce back into title contention? At 38 years old, it will be a tough task because Masvidal's best days are already behind him. And perhaps at this point in time, he needs a win more than ever.
But you can't lose if you're Jorge. You gotta win. You have got to get this one.
Only time will tell whether Street Jesus will have his second coming or not. But one thing is for sure, Masvidal has made a career out of doing the unthinkable, so it isn't over for him until it really is. That said, you just watched us cover one of the toughest fighters of all time, Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. If you liked this video, please subscribe to our channel and press the little button icon next to it so you get notified next time we upload one. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.